Hi, it's time for Conversations with Bob and Sherry. Sherry's not here, but attorney David Houck is here to help us understand the Trump charges, the arraignment, the indictment process, the whole thing. Hi, David.
How you doing, Bob?
Good. Hey, so I wanted to start with a kind of an explanation of the differences between accounting rules and things in business, because the primary narrative seems to be no one's above the law. You know, he committed a crime. He should be punished. And then the counter, but what crime? Government employees. If you're a government employee or an elected official, everything that you spend of the government's money is really taxpayer money. So there's really extreme tight rules around how that money's accounted for. Everything that you buy has to be 100% accurate. If you're a public company, publicly traded stock market, investors buy your stock, trade your stock based on the financial information that you provide. So there's strict rules around how that's accounted for. It has to be very, it's just a high bar of scrutiny on a public company. Trump is a private company. So this is an oversimplification, somewhat hyperbolic, but it's his money. He can pretty much do what he wants with it. I mean, so that's why it's a misdemeanor. And I don't even know if calling something a legal expense, if it necessarily wasn't, would be even a crime in other states. But it's a misdemeanor, and they have to connect it with something more serious to make it a felony. For example, if he did creative accounting or he misaccounted for something in order to avoid paying taxes, that's obviously very serious. The problem would be he's not paying his taxes. Or if he was seeking a loan from a bank, a valuation of the company, anything that would be defraud someone who is making a financial decision about his business, that would be very serious. But we're talking two payments around $130,000. It's really immaterial in the size of his company, and so there's really no law against what you call hush money. I mean, it's a non-disclosure agreement. It's standard in business. Most of my jobs, if the company would let a person go in engineering or something, we would offer them severance pay in exchange for something from them. Like, you're not going to badmouth the company. We already had non-disclosure for the technical information, but if you're going to pay someone severance, that's an opportunity to ask for something in return. So, and I do understand too that he sued her for violating that non-disclosure agreement. I think she has a judgment against her for $500,000, and Eric Trump tweeted out today that another $132,000 judgment against her. So it's kind of funny that he's being treated like, the lawbreaker for paying someone like that for sex and then paying her to cover it up, when in reality she's actually broken the agreement and having to pay him.
Right.
But
That's right.
So anyway, I mean, oversimplification. Like, if a man were to own a bar and he decided to have a bunch of hookers in with his friends, he didn't really want his wife to find out about it, so he called it catering, and he put it on the books as catering. I mean, unless it affected taxes in some way or something like that, there's really no law against it. In a sense, there's no victim. So that's how I understand it. I don't know how accurate that is from a legal perspective, but
Well, I think it's spot on. When we talk about this, and the interesting thing here, Bob, is that, looking at this issue today, one of the things that I did today, and I do this on a regular basis, is go to a website called Real Clear Politics.
Okay.
And that website covers major stories, and it gives you both sides, right? It gives you the Democrat side, the Republican side. So you can sit there and read op-eds, competing op-eds, and it's a wonderful way to look at issues.
Okay.
And when you look at the narratives on the two sides, what's so interesting is that on the right, the discussion is very technical, very legal. Let's talk about the merits of the legal case. And on the left, it's completely different. They never get into the weeds about the actual legal merits of the case. They're just saying, hey, this is a great thing. This proves no one's above the law. Even a former president can be prosecuted. That means America works and that everything works the way it's supposed to. So those are sort of the competing narratives that are out there. But I think the reason that we're here tonight to talk about this thing is what are the legal merits, right, to
Right.
this claim. So you have to begin with the indictment itself, how that process works, what the theories are, and all that sort of thing. And when you start with Alvin Bragg, what we know about him is he's an ambitious politician, DA. He ran on a platform that he said he was going to get Trump. And I think one of the takeaways from all of this, and I think this is one of the ramifications that I think is going to outlive even this controversy itself, is what it means for the future of our government and ambitious politicians that are sitting as DAs in other cities who say, hey, look, that guy was able to make a career by doing this. Now no president's going to be safe now. I
Sure.
mean, none. I mean, what's to stop a red mayor somewhere from going after Biden and the Hunter Biden thing and doing it? So we've really crossed the Rubicon in that aspect, which I think is very concerning. I mean, I'm sure you have some thoughts on that as well.
Well, sure. When you were saying that, the word unprecedented keeps getting thrown out. And certainly it's unprecedented. That's factual. But if Trump actually did some crime deserving of such attention, national attention, with all the issues in our country, and actually to bring a ex-president and a candidate into court, I mean, I can only think of Richard Nixon. I mean, he resigned before that could happen. So, okay, if he deserves that kind of treatment, then certainly it's unprecedentedly, he's an unprecedentedly bad president. Or is it unprecedented that the other party, governors and attorneys general, would do something like this that really doesn't have merit? It's really not. That maybe is really politics and trying to interfere with an election. So unprecedented, but from which angle?
Right. And I think too, we're going to see in the next weeks and months the real life impact that this is going to have on our country. And I think you're hearing it on both sides that there's genuine concerns about the fallout of this in terms of actual violence, political violence and stuff like that. So that's kind of frightening.
Sure.
And it's not a good development. And, that brings me to circle back to sort of, the basis for all this and the alleged crime that we're talking about. So Alvin Bragg, his theory basically is that Trump had his lawyer, Michael Cohen, pay off the porn star Stormy Daniels to keep quiet about his alleged affair with Trump in advance of the 2016 election. And as you touched on earlier, hush payments are not a crime. And you can do that. And you gave a couple of good examples.
Business transaction, right? I want
Correct.
something from you. I'm willing to pay for it.
Correct.
And your silence, I can buy your silence. It's perfectly legal.
Absolutely. And every day in my practice of law, I settle cases with non-disclosure agreements in the release agreements that say nobody can talk about this release. Nobody can talk about it. And if you do, you're violating all kinds of rules here, and you can have there's legal ramifications for that. So it is part and parcel to legal practice, and there is no crime in behaving that way. So the second thing that is agreed that happened with Trump is that Trump was going to reimburse Cohen for the payments.
Mm-hmm.
And he did this by writing a series of checks, I believe. I think it was between February 2017 and December 2017. And he wrote these checks, and I think he put them down as legal fees pursuant to a retainer agreement, okay, which is not exactly right, but that's the way he did it.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bragg is alleging that these records were false, and he's charged Trump with 34 instances of falsely recording these payments, each of them charged as a separate felony. So that's kind of the basis for this. Now,
how does it turn into 34? I mean, as far as I know, there were two payments, and maybe there's a credit and a debit, and there's, how does it get from two payments to 34?
Well, that is some creative work by Alvin Bragg,
okay,
for sure. So what he's done is he's taken each payment individually and turned it into a crime, and then each act that followed. And let me put it this way: so Trump
writing the
reimbursed
check was one, entering it into the accounting ledger is another.
two, right?
Wow.
And he did it with each check.
Okay.
Right? And then voila, we got 34 felonies.
Okay.
All right, and that's essentially what's happened here. And
does something like that help in a real? Assuming there's no politics at play, does doing it that way actually help a case?
Well, that's a great question. I think why prosecutors do it that way is, if you can get 34 charges here and they're all crap, but you can get one to stick, you win.
Okay,
right?
So this is not unprecedented. They do this.
No.
Okay.
No, it's. But I would say it's a tactic of unwily prosecutors who know they don't have a good case.
Okay.
I mean, that's where you see it arise most often, because they're basically throwing everything on the wall, hoping one thing is going to stick, and that's kind of what we're looking at here.
I was on jury duty twice. I did criminal and civil. And that experience and hearing stuff like this, most of us go through life thinking, well, as long as I don't break any laws, I'm okay. But if you get into that legal system, there's a lot of discretion and things that come into play. So it's a little scary.
It is. It is. One of the things that I have observed in my practice of law over the years, especially when dealing with clients who have criminal entanglements with the legal system, is when you get wrapped up in criminal entanglements in the legal system, it's very hard to get out. It's very hard, and it often repeats or ends up in repeat crimes, and you end up back in there, and it's very hard. It's very hard. So it's not a good place to be. When you're being accused by the state of committing a crime. Is
part of that because you come under a microscope of law enforcement as well as prosecutors, and so once you've gotten into the system, it's a lot easier to get charged the next time and that time.
Yeah, I mean, if you get on their radar, there's not that they're looking for you. It's just that if you make one mistake. And you end up making a second one, you're going to find yourself in big trouble, and that's what happens. And I'm thinking of it in the context of DUIs, right? You see somebody in a DUI, and their first DUI, they get basically a slap on the wrist, right? You get probation, and if you successfully complete all the terms of that probation, they expunge your conviction. But people will, go out again, and they have one beer and they get stopped, and all of a sudden they've got a second DUI.
Right.
And the ramifications of that are very serious, of course.
Sure, it escalates real quickly with DUI.
Right. So there's all kinds of problems that arise once you get into the system. So it's not a place you want to be.
Right.
So when we talk about the indictment itself, so the indictment process itself is supposed to be secret. You convene a grand jury. The prosecutor presents all the evidence unopposed. There's no defense attorney present. and they put on basically their own case, put on their best witnesses, put in their best evidence, and then say, these are the charges. Will you provide an indictment? And essentially, that's what's happened here. But there's a number of problems. There are some pundits who are saying that the indictment itself is defective, and it starts with the statute of limitations, and that's why you're seeing the felony charges. They have to bootstrap it onto the felony charges, all right, to be able to come forward with these claims. So that's where the indictment itself runs into problems, okay, because the indictment has to say what the crime is. Okay, so when you break it down and take a look at his particular indictment, here's what you have to consider: the Constitution's Fifth Amendment guarantees that citizens cannot be accused of a serious crime, which is essentially a felony, absent an indictment by a grand jury. Okay. And that indictment has two purposes, and we already touched on that. It has to put the defendant on notice of exactly what the crime is that he's been charged with, and so he can prepare a defense. And the second, the indictment sets the parameters for the defendant's closely related right to double jeopardy protection. And double jeopardy is that you can't charge somebody twice for the same crime.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So those are your protections under the Fifth Amendment, and those are the basic things that an indictment has to do. And here, the indictment fails to say what the crime is. It doesn't say. Now, Bragg has come out and said that he's charging Trump with felony falsifications of records under a New York election statute, section 175.10, to establish, the offense that he's trying to bootstrap on and get over the statute. And he's got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump caused a false entry to be made in his business records, and that he did so with an intent to defraud. That specifically, and this is the key, that specifically includes trying to commit another crime or aid or conceal the commission of that crime.
Okay.
And the indictment does not. It does.
Should
it's
it?
total. It absolutely has to.
Okay.
It absolutely has to. It's a prima facie requirement of an indictment for it to be legit.
So in essence, an indictment is the formal charging of a crime. Is that what that is?
Yeah, basically it's saying we believe a crime is committed and there's enough evidence here to charge you with it.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So
it's
in essence,
not a
they've
conviction.
done that, but they're saying we're not telling you what the crime is.
Right. Which is essentially the big problem with the indictment itself, and there's other problems. You've got the statute of limitations on the misdemeanors. You've got the fact that the indictment is probably defective, and then you've got a problem with the lack of jurisdiction. Okay, he's a state official who's trying to charge a federal official with a state crime. So he may lack jurisdiction to even do that.
Was the crime committed in New York? Is that where the accounting was done? Is that the basis?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So it happened in New York, and he's trying to charge a federal official with a state crime, and that's going to be a real problem. And so if these arguments are raised, and I'm certain they're going to be raised, because I'm no legal genius when it comes to these things. I'm certain that Trump's attorneys will raise these problems with the indictment, and this case could get kicked early. It could. I'm not saying it will.
Okay.
Because, like you touched on, there's great discretion here, and the court has great discretion.
Okay.
And if the judge feels like there's some merit to this and they want to collect more evidence, they're going to go forward.
So in a normal world, in a state attorney general, what are some of the reasons they decide to pursue certain cases over others? I mean, can a state attorney general just decide to go after any case within the state? And if so, how do they pick and choose? Because there's always crimes being committed.
Yeah, I don't practice criminal law, and in terms of what the AGs do, and
Okay.
it's my understanding, Bob, is that there's a number of offices, under the AG's umbrella.
Okay.
And there's criminal division, there's civil division, and they get involved in certain cases. And when it comes to criminal cases, I think they look for the most serious offenses, like the violations of the RICO statute and things of that nature.
And that's wouldn't it be the one that threatens the interest of the state, the people of the state the most?
Correct.
It's going to do the most harm.
Correct.
So what harm was done by Trump paying Stormy Daniels and calling it legal fees? What harm was done there?
And ultimately, that is exactly right. And you touched on that at the very beginning in your narrative, that it's Trump's private money, it's his money. And who is he defrauding? Himself?
Right.
There's no victim in this alleged crime. Right. So you can hate Donald Trump as much as you want, and you can think he's a criminal, but I'm not sure that legally there's much merit to any of this.
Right.
And if you have listeners out there that don't believe that's true, I would ask you to go read all the narratives on the left and see that they're not talking about the legal merits. The only one that I could find, I have a note here. Hang on, let me look at it. I found one guy on the left from Salon, it was Mark Joseph Stern of Slate, who wrote in his op-ed, he asked, what election law exactly did this plot run afoul of? The entire prosecution hinges on that question, and yet neither the indictment nor the statement of facts identifies it. I mean, so that's
in politics. So we're talking law, and I think people want, especially if they ever get into the legal system or they encounter federal law enforcement, they want everything to be fair and above board, and they want to know they have a fair shot. So when you said at the front that I would say the Democrats probably are spinning the narrative that this is great for America because it proves that no one's above the law and it's strong for our democracy and all that. Well, I mean, it's almost like sometimes they say the opposite just to create, because I don't know if you saw, but the president of El Salvador tweeted out today, think what you want about former President Trump and the reasons he's being indicted, but just imagine if this happened in any other country where a government arrested the main opposition candidate. Mm-hmm. The United States' ability to use democracy, in quotes, as foreign policy is gone. I mean, that's pretty strong indictment of the United States hypocrisy.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, the problem here is that, Clinton didn't get charged, and he purged himself. This is a fact.
Right.
The man, and that's a crime.
So there was discretion there to say, okay, he perjured himself, but he's the president.
He's a president, and we're not gonna turn it into a banana republic.
Right.
And that is sort of what I said at the beginning. We've crossed a Rubicon.
Uh-huh.
And one of the narratives that I heard on the right, I think last night, is that Trump now is, he's not a person anymore. He's a symbol. Mm-hmm. He's a symbol of every hardworking American that's ever been screwed by the system, and just never getting a break while there appears to be a double standard for the other guy. Mm-hmm. And, that's if half the country thinks that way, that could be a real problem.
Yeah.
A real problem.
So do you know what the next steps are? I had heard that judge is going to hear motions, but that's not until December 4th. So that means this all hangs out there Campaigns are going on and politics and,
Yeah. The next step is a preliminary hearing, and
okay.
prior to that, the sides are going to engage in some preliminary discovery, and
Okay.
so they're going to
So they're
collect
doing
information.
discovery. They're not before a judge necessarily. They meet together. Is that,
Well, discovery, you serve written questions on your opponent, and
I
you
see.
say, answer this, and you request all your documents. I want all these documents. Give me all that stuff, and you collect all that.
Okay.
Okay, and then you go into a preliminary hearing, and the standard for a preliminary hearing is you have to prove a prima facie case,
Right.
that not beyond a reasonable doubt. Prima facie means a crime likely occurred, and you're the guy that probably did it.
Okay.
Okay, and if you can meet that standard, the charges get held, and there can be some negotiations about
Mm-hmm.
which charges get held and what charges might get let go.
Yep.
But after that preliminary hearing, the case moves down to the big court, and,
Okay.
you get into the big court, and you head towards a trial. So that's what they're doing right now. So they're going to be filing motions, fighting over evidence, and that sort of thing.
Never a dull moment in politics anymore.
No, no, you wake up every day and there's something new to be shocked about.
You mingle with other attorneys. Does sort of the attorney community talk about these things? And,
Oh, sure.
is
Oh,
it
sure.
like the regular people where you have people on one side, people on the other side, or are they more objective, do you think?
Because lawyers advocate professionally, and you would find that most lawyers are even though they're on opposite sides are very good friends.
Okay.
But when you go into the courtroom, you're enemies,
Right.
and you conduct yourself accordingly, you know, in the courtroom. But outside the courtroom, you can be very, very good friends with opposing counsel, and there is a free exchange of ideas. You sort of see the marketplace of ideas function in real time and in real life when you're dealing with attorneys. At least that's been my experience, right?
Okay.
Over the years, I have many lawyers that politically were on opposite sides, and we can talk politics for hours and never walk away sore about the conversation. In fact, we
Okay.
probably walk away laughing at how foolish the other guy is.
Sure.
But but we're able to freely exchange the ideas and do that, and it's the way our discourse is supposed to be in this
Okay.
country.
When you read other attorneys taking some hard line, crimes were committed, it's a great thing that when you like totally disagree with what they're saying, do you question where they're coming from? I mean, do you assume that it's something other than just their legal expertise speaking?
No, I think that like all people, they can have closely held or deeply held beliefs about things that they may not necessarily be based on the legal elements of the issue,
Right.
uh, but factually they think they have an argument,
Yeah.
and you run into that in practice where you have a legal issue where you're right. But there's still an argument from the other side that has to be considered, and you have to give it weight.
Well, I guess we see that in some of the Supreme Court justices too. Because you look at like a Clarence Thomas, and he's all very technical. Very just this is what it says. These are the words. But when you hear from like a Sotomayor, there's more of our role in the society and making things better. More of a kind of social
Hmm.
activist kind of a bent to her. So I guess like everybody else, a legal
Yeah,
mind is they're
yeah,
different, just
yeah,
like
and
other
and
people.
and the judges are not supposed to allow their personal views, their religious views, their anything to infiltrate into their analysis of a case. But that's like asking you not to be a human,
Right. Yeah.
right? And so judges will inevitably look at things from a particular viewpoint, and they try not to. They try not to. They try to argue objectively, but it's hard.
And I think that's good. I mean, I understand how we are all biased. You know, we all see things often as how we want to see them. But the best thing you can do, any human can do, is have an awareness of that and make an attempt to question yourself. Say, you know, am I really making the right decision here? Or, you know, so yeah, if you make the effort, that's more than most people, I think, do.
Yeah, and you're right. And you know, one of the most important things about the exchange of legal arguments, when you're engaged in a legal argument, you're arguing to a neutral in the judge,
Okay.
and you're never talking to your opponent. So I'm not looking at you, making my argument to you, right, and
Okay.
calling
Right.
you out personally. All right, you're the defendant, I'm the plaintiff. So instead of saying, well, Bob says A, B, C, I'm going to be saying, well, defendant has made these allegations or these claims, Your Honor, that this is what the law says. So the very construction of the way it's supposed to be done brings sort of a neutrality to the argument.
Less personal. Yeah. So you're
Exactly.
addressing the jury, the judge, and yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And you know, you can do that in your own interactions in your own daily life when you're dealing with people and you're
Sure.
having these conversations, and it's so important. You know, when you get into a discussion with somebody and they start to, you know, say, call names, you're a racist, you're whatever. When they start saying all these things, that shuts down the discourse.
It does.
And it doesn't allow people to exchange the ideas. And that's what you want to be able to do. You want to be able to talk about it. You may never convince me the sky is blue. I may walk away and say, I don't care what he says, he's wrong.
Right.
But the idea is that we're able to have that conversation and exchange our ideas about it.
Yep. Very good. All right. So what do you think? So they're going to do discovery. Do you have an idea of the time frame? I mean, will we see any news of this in the next month? Or is it going to be pretty much what we have now with everybody arguing different sides of it?
Yeah, I guess it's going to be how tightly the sides hold their discovery
Okay.
and the things that they collect.
I see.
If things get leaked, you know, we'll hear about it, or if the sides come out with statements about evidence, or we're filing a motion claiming these things, that might put it into the news cycle,
Right.
and we'll hear about it. And of course, everybody's going to be scrounging to find out what it is they're looking at and talking about. So it's not going anywhere.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be hot for.
Yeah.
I
You know,
still
and
feel like this. It's still part of politics. You know. I mean, I think
yeah.
that in most other cases, this would have never been pursued.
Well, it's never been pursued before,
Well,
frankly,
unprecedented.
right? Unprecedented, like you said. So we're in a new age for sure.
Okay.
New age.
All right. Well, I mean, thanks, David.
No, you're welcome, Bob.
Very,
Thanks for
very,
having
very
me on
helpful.
again.
Appreciate your input, and any new developments, we'll give you a call.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right, Bob. Thanks so much.
Thank you.